Hello and welcome to another episode of India and Global Left. If you're new to the show, please smash that subscribe button. Also consider becoming a YouTube member, a Patreon, or donate a small amount given in the link in the description box. Let me welcome our guest tonight, Dr. Trita Parsi. Dr. Parsi is an author known for his work on US-Iran relations and West Asian geopolitics. He is the co-founder of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. Dr. Parsi, welcome back to India and Global Left.
Great to be back.
I wanted to start with the simple question, how close are we to a US attack on Iran?
Unfortunately, we are very close, and the first reports coming out of the talks that are taking place right now in Geneva are not particularly positive, given the position the US has taken and the distance that has with the Iranian proposal. The US position essentially is a complete capitulation, and it's not even offering much sanctions relief, if any at all. And I fear that that is creating a situation in which, for the Iranians, a war may actually offer them better chances than the offer that the US has put on the negotiating table. Because even though the Iranians believe that, I'm sure they understand that they are not going to be able to win a war against the United States, they do believe that they can inflict significant damage on the US and by that force the US to back off and adopt a more realistic negotiating position.
I want to take a step back and ask you to describe for our viewers why does the US want to attack Iran? Because in mainstream media, it has been presented as if the case is of the Iranian nuclear program only, and as if it is about zero enrichment versus sanctions. But we know, as Secretary of State Marco Rubio has made it clear, that it is about the Iranian ballistic missile programs. It might be. It is also much more than that, about regime change and so on. So, if you could break down for our viewers, why does the U.S. want to attack Iran?
Well, I think at this point it's quite clear that in the absence of pressure from the Israeli government, the US would not be in this position right now. Trump did attack Iran back in June of last year as a result of Israeli pressure. He said that he had obliterated the program. He is back again saying that they have a nuclear weapons program as a result of Netanyahu's visit with him on December 29th. So the Israelis are constantly pushing the United States to go to war with Iran, whether the pretext is the nuclear program or if the pretext shifts to the ballistic missiles or whether it's about the protests. There's a constant push from the Israelis for the United States to take out Iran militarily and give Israel a much different Middle East landscape in which its domination or its desired domination no longer can be challenged by any significant party in the region itself.
And what is beyond the Israel lobby? Does the U.S. Imperial machine, I'm thinking about the military contractors, the intelligence apparatus that has been very active in the region for a long time, the ideological positions of the Iran hawks, etc. Does that matter as well over and above the Israel lobby?
Certainly, it certainly matters, but in the absence of the push from the Israel lobby, I don't think that would have led to the kind of showdown that we have right now. I think it's also important to keep in mind that the military industrial complex wants wars that go on for a long time, but are not wars that really the United States loses militarily. Afghanistan was a cash cow for them, and they were totally happy just continuing it for decades on end. So, but with Iran, it's a very different story. It's actually a military power. He has ballistic missiles that can penetrate all layers of American and Israeli air defense systems, clearly could strike at Israel, potentially can sink American ships. It's a much, much more costly endeavor and not one that I think that they have on top of their agenda. But this is on the top of the agenda of the pro-Israel voices in Washington.
The New York Times has reported about a meeting. I suppose it was last Thursday. I might be wrong about the exact day, which comprised of the U.S. Military chief, President Trump, Vice President, Secretary of State, White House chief, etc., where they deliberated the outcomes and the other implications of the war. My question is, do you think there is a consensus among the ruling elites in the US when it comes to US attack on Iran?
Not at all. There isn't even a consensus within the White House. In fact, the person who seems to be most eager or inclined to at least consider the option is the president himself, and a lot of voices around him are very skeptical precisely because this will be a very dangerous endeavor. This is not going to be Venezuela. This is not something that will be guaranteed to be quick and glorious, and will have dramatic domestic political repercussions if it goes the wrong way. And you have very crucial midterm elections coming up for Trump. So, from a political standpoint, this does not seem to be a particularly smart move for the president. I do think the president wants an exit out of this, that he wants to find a way that he can climb down and declare victory, because it's embarrassing, of course, to have put half of the US Air Force, one third of the US Navy in the region and then not get anything for it. So I think he's looking for something that can enable him to declare victory. But at the same time, he is suffering from an unrealistic perspective on how weak Iran has become in the last 2 years. It has become weaker, but not as weak as the president believes. And this over exaggerated view of Iranian weakness is fueling maximalist positions by the United States at the negotiating table that actually maximize or increases the risk of war, because those maximalist demands are not going to be met because Iran is not as weak as the United States believes it to be.
Can you tell a little bit more about the kind of responses or strengths that Iran has? We know about the ballistic missile programs. We also have seen the practical demonstrations of Iranian drones in the NATO-Russia conflict in Ukraine. There are talks about the Iranian allies, particularly in Iraq, but also in other regions. If you could tell us about what kind of responses would Iran have against an US attack?
Well, I think you mentioned several of them right there. And I think, again, what the Iranian strategy likely will be in that scenario is not an outright military victory, but rather to inflict so much pain on the US that Trump realizes that continuing the war will come at the expense of his own presidency. The Iranians don't have to win the war, they just need to get as close as possible to destroying Trump's presidency before they lose the war. And that can be done, they believe, by striking back at US ships, at US bases, at US soft targets if necessary, at oil installations throughout the Persian Gulf, potentially closing down the Strait of Hormuz, which they have an easier time doing now with missiles rather than using mines, and collapse the global economy to a certain extent, fuel inflation, oil prices. All of these different things will inflict a significant political cost on Trump. In addition to a military cost that I think, if the Iranian prediction or the way they think it will go proves to be true, it will be a military cost the US has not seen, not even in Iraq or in Afghanistan. And as a result, and essentially make it clear, yes, ultimately Iran can lose this war, but it will come at such an expense for the United States that it's not worth it. And I think the Iranians are basing this to a certain extent on the experience of the Houthis, because Trump started this unnecessary war against the Houthis when they were shooting missiles at ships because they wanted trying to force the Israelis to stop the genocide in Gaza. And after 7 or 8 weeks, the United States kind of lost interest in this because it wasn't going that well. The Houthis did not back down, they did fire back, and he just let it go and declared victory and even praised the Houthis. Now, the potential mistake the Iranians are committing here is that the Houthis never managed to actually kill an American soldier. They never managed to hit an American ship. If they had, and you had 50, 100, 250 dead American soldiers, we do not know how Trump would have reacted to that type of a scenario. We've never been in a situation in which a large number of American soldiers have been killed in combat under Trump's watch. So that would unlock a completely different level of Trump's psychology. And just assuming that he will back off because that's what he did when the Houthis just fought back but didn't manage to kill anyone is a strong assumption. It may be a completely erroneous assumption. So rather than getting the United States to back off by fighting back, there's also a likelihood that the United States may actually triple down on this conflict and use far more firepower, including potential weapons that have not been used since the Second World War.
Um, I'm curious about your thoughts about the nature of the attack itself. I mean, you've said that as a consequence to Iranian fighting back, they can triple down. But just to start off, do you think it would be an outright bombing campaign or an assassination campaign like we've seen in the region by both Israel and the US? What kind of responses do you think that the U.S. might unleash on Iran? Excuse me.
Well, it would be the United States most likely that would initiate the conflict, and it would be the Iranian action that would be a response to it. And the question is, what would the initial American attack be? Would it go after oil installations? Would it just go after key decision makers and military leaders? Would it go after just nuclear sites and ballistic missiles? Would it go after all of these things altogether? Would it go after ways in which you want to see the entire state collapse? Or does it want to pursue a path in which it causes the regime to collapse, but not the state to collapse? It remains unclear exactly which path the United States would go because I don't think the US has made a decision on this. But depending on what the US does, it will impact how the Iranians respond. I don't think they will go after oil installations in the Persian Gulf unless the US targets Iranian oil installation and its capability of selling oil. At the end of the day, the Iranians want to make clear that any attack will lead to war, but they still want to have an escalation ladder. So I don't think they will go all out right away, but exactly how they calibrate it remains to be seen. And hopefully it will not be seen, because I still believe that ultimately any type of a military confrontation, regardless of what the Iranians' response is, will end up becoming a lose-lose situation for both countries.
And what about the Arab states, particularly UAE, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia, that are traditional allies of the US but don't seem to have any interest in a US attack or on Iran? Do you think they can have any leverage or lobbying capacity against this attack?
Undoubtedly, they do have a tremendous amount of leverage. Whether they are using it fully remains to be seen. I think the Qataris are extremely active, trying to find a mediated solution. They recognize that war would be a disaster for them. The Saudis also are not favorable towards a war. They have not lobbied as hard as the Qataris have. They still have an ability to do things that potentially could stop this war. The Emiratis are at least perceived to be closer to the Israeli position. Whether they have actually used much of their resources for that or not is unclear to me, but they're not on the same page as the Qataris, the Omanis, the Kuwaitis, and the Saudis are on this issue. I think also on the Saudi side, there is a concern that if the US doesn't do anything after having brought so much military power to the Persian Gulf and doesn't use it, that will also embolden Iran in a way that the Saudis feel uncomfortable about. But I think between the option of them feeling uncomfortable about Iran getting somewhat emboldened and a war in the region that would completely destroy their prospects for their 2030 plan, etc., they nevertheless choose a path in which the US does not go down the path of war, even if it means that Iran in the short term will become somewhat emboldened.
And if you could talk a little bit about the geopolitics, particularly Russian and Chinese support for Iran. We've seen during the June attack, uh, not very direct support in my assessment. I interviewed many from Iran, and they said that Russia and China support us, but it's primarily us who has to defend ourselves. What kind of support could be coming from Russia and China? People are talking about the S 300, 400 systems from Russia, the anti ballistic missile programs, and also Chinese radars to counter the stealthiness of US airplanes. Beyond that, or even militarily, technologically, what kind of support could be coming from Russia and China?
I think the Russians and the Chinese are not going to give so much military support that they actually risk their own relations with the United States in a very detrimental way. The Russian priority, of course, is still Ukraine. The Chinese are careful not to speed up the path towards some form of a confrontation with the US. But nevertheless, there are layers below that that seems to be things that they're considering, whether it ranges from weapon sales to intelligence support. And it does seem like the Iranians already are using and have tried to signal to the US that they are using intelligence that likely came from Russia or China. So, for instance, a couple of weeks ago, an Iranian drone was flying towards an American ship in the Indian Ocean and was shot down by the Americans. Now, the Iranians don't have the capability of seeing that area in the sea because they don't have satellites um, uh, covering that part of the world. That intelligence most likely came from China or potentially from Russia. And it seems to me that the Iranians wanted to make sure that the US knew this as part of their deterrent to be able to say, we have the capacity, even though Iran itself doesn't have the capacity, we have the capacity of getting that capacity from other states in order to be able to see you where you think you are unseen.
Uh, my I'm coming to my final questions. If we were to avert a war, if there could be negotiations, can you lay out some of the frameworks that can be a an agreeable framework for both sides? We have heard about from the Iranian side that they are committed to non-militaristic use of the nuclear program under the NPT. Um, what kind of framework can be agreeable to both sides?
I think the framework that could be agreeable to both sides is one in which the pathways to nuclear weapons in Iran are completely closed off. That the Iranians would be able to enrich on their own soil, but it would either be through a consortium, it would be on a needs basis. There would be no amassing of a stockpile of enriched uranium on their own soils. The levels would be below what you had in the JCPOA. The number of centrifuges would be below what you had in the JCPOA, things that would enable Trump to say that he got a better deal than Obama, and that would enable the Iranians to say that they have still stood firm on what they consider to be their inalienable sovereign right, which is to have nuclear energy for peaceful purposes.
We'll leave it there, Dr. Parsi. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hi, my name is Ayushman. I, along with Jyotisman, have started this platform. In the last 2 years, we have tried to build content for the left and progressive forces. We have interviewed economists, historians, political commentators, and activists so far. If you have liked our content so far and want us to build an archive for the left, I have two requests for you. Please do consider donating for the cause. Link is in the description below. Also, if you are not able to do so, don't feel sad. You can always like our videos and share our videos to your comrades. Finally, don't forget to hit the subscribe button.